Well, welcome everyone to our 13th ARCI video meeting. This is indeed a special occasion here on the 17th of July, 2021. This happens to be our 1-year anniversary of starting these meetings, and it doesn't seem like it's been a year, but we started this last July. So happy birthday to us, and I brought out a special thing to celebrate. You can see our agenda here in front of us today, and we've got some great presentations lined up to share here. And first thing we're going to do this morning is I'm going to just talk briefly about the protocol, and then Matt will talk just a little bit about the fact that we're recording this and putting it on YouTube. So I would like to thank everyone, though, that's been participating and is new to us and joining us today. That's made this pretty successful over the last year. We've had some hard times with the pandemic getting together, and this has served a very useful role in keeping the club active, and it's going to continue to do so even as we have started our swap meets again. So we're going to continue to do these and continue to do swap meets. So I would like to also encourage all of you to be presenters here. This is a wonderful forum to get out and share what you know about radios and collections and history and all that, and how to restore these radios. So please consider being a presenter, and you can send us an email at that email address there on your screen with your ideas, or if you're a little concerned about how to make a presentation, we can help you with that. And so please consider that, and there'll be a little poll coming out here in a minute after the presentations that you can indicate your desire to be a presenter. We're going to take the month of August off from these. We're going to take a little break. Summertime's got a lot of activities, a lot of other swap meets, club meets that people like to go to. So we're going to not do this in the next month of August. And our next meeting will be September 18th. So at this point, I'd like to just briefly turn it over to Matt, who'll give us just a little reminder about what this means being on YouTube. Matt?
So this is primarily for the newcomers to this online meet. Old timers, please excuse the duplication. So as Tom mentioned, we are recording this for later presentation on YouTube. So primarily what that means we need to pay attention to is don't show or say anything you don't want everyone who's watching this on YouTube to see. The best way to do that for semi-confidential information like your phone number, email, directions to your house, stuff like that, is to put it in the chat. We use the chat to show things that are wanted or for sale. We also include information like the invite to next month's online meet in there. And as a favor from Mark, we include the private invite to tomorrow's Mark event as well. That's all in the chat. So you may want to save the chat to a file on your PC before the end of the presentations, because once the meeting is over, you no longer have access to the chat. In terms of YouTube, we need to pay attention to two main things. They're very careful not to allow copyrighted material, and that's primarily music, to be presented on YouTube that you don't have a license to. So as you're doing a demonstration of a radio that you just restored, please tune it to a talk station, not a music station. And then don't share anything that's already on YouTube. YouTube does not look kindly upon people trying to steal material from other channels and publish it as their own. So with that, I'm going to launch a quick poll to see who's interested in presenting a show and tell today, and we'll leave this up for a minute, and Tom can take it over.
Okay, well, the Main thing I'd like to say at this point before we start our presentations is please stay on mute unless you have a question. That'll make things very smooth. And the very first presenter we have today is Brian Belanger, and he has prepared a presentation on the National Capital Radio and Television Museum in Bowie, Maryland. And this is a very special presentation, and we're going to learn a lot about this museum, and it's something that we really enjoy doing in this forum, is to hear about museums, because it gives us a place to go when we decide to travel. So, Brian, I'd like to turn it over to you, please.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Well, thank you very much for inviting me. Let me just say that I joined your club just a few months ago. My good friend Joe Coaster has been a member for quite a while. And now that you folks are live streaming on the internet, my friend Joe said, Brian, you really need to join ARCI. It's a wonderful organization, and their meetings that they're putting on the internet are just terrific. And so I joined, and I'm very glad I did. I've really been enjoying participating in your meetings. So anyway, thanks for doing a good job, and proud to be a member of ARCI now. So anyway, I was asked to give a talk about this museum in Bowie, Maryland, which is on the sort of the east side of the Washington, D.C. area. It's not far from Annapolis, our state capital. This is a picture of the building we're in. It looks actually quite small from this picture, but it's really quite a bit bigger than it looks when you get inside. So let me tell you a little bit about this museum. Like all museums, we have a mission statement. I'll let you read the mission statement here. It's kind of a highfalutin mission statement, but basically what we do is we're trying to tell a story of radio and television in American homes. It was founded by our local club here. I think at least a few of you may be members of the Mid-Atlantic Antique Radio Club. Club has been in business for more than 20 years. Some years ago, a bunch of us from the club decided we wanted to try to create a museum, and so we put our minds to that. We started by doing temporary exhibits at like public libraries and empty stores around the area. And then in June of 1999, we got access to the building that we're in now in the town of Bowie, Maryland. And we opened in June, so we've been there more than 20 years. It's free parking, free admission, but donations encouraged, and most people who visit put something in the donation box. We've had visitors from all 50 states and 30 foreign countries. We do keep track of that. In addition to the museum itself, we have a very extensive library with thousands of books and magazines, although most of them are stored off-site in a separate building off-site. We have a building on site that's our restoration shop, where we have some technician volunteers who repair radios and television sets. We're open 3 days a week, Fridays from 9 to 4, Saturdays and Sundays from noon to 4. We'd like to be open more days a week, but we need more volunteers if we're going to do that. As I mentioned, the main emphasis is radio and television broadcasting and home receivers. We start by having a few things about like the Marconi era, but most of the emphasis in the museum is from the period from the 20s through the 60s. Here's a little girl who was visiting the museum, listening to our crystal radio and expressing surprise at hearing sound come out of the crystal radio. We have about 30,000 old radio programs stored in MP3 form on our computers. So when we want to demonstrate a radio, we can we can play Fibber, McGee and Molly and Jack Benny and The Shadow and all the old programs through our old radios. And we have lots and lots of DVDs and videotapes of early programs that we can show on our restored television sets. We have 2 part-time employees, a director and administrative person. We have about 20 volunteers who keep the place going. But in spite of our very low budget, we have a 5-star rating on TripAdvisor, which is pretty darn good. And a tourist organization called our museum one of the 10 best museums in the state of Maryland. So we're proud of that. Because of the pandemic, we were trying to figure out ways to connect better with our members. So one of the things we started is a bi-weekly lecture series. So every other Wednesday night, we do a lecture. I've done quite a bit of them. Robert Lozier, who's with us this morning, has done a number of excellent lectures for us. So that's one of the benefits of being a member. You get to tune in on those Zoom lectures. We started something during the pandemic called the Artifact of the Week, where, and now we're actually, so we went back to bi-weekly, so we're doing it every other week now, where we send out a one-page thing describing one of the objects in the museum with a picture of it and information about it. We do have, from time to time, special events like book signings. We do an annual gala honoring local broadcasters, and that's a fundraiser for us. We do have a program for kids, which had to be canceled during the pandemic, but hopefully we can start it up again. It's really designed for things like Brownie troops and Cub Scouts. And we teach the kids about the difference between sound waves and radio waves, and let them see their voice on an oscilloscope. We talk about the difference between amplitude and frequency and that sort of thing. We publish a quarterly newsletter called Dials and Channels with very interesting articles about radio and TV history. We teach radio repair classes. We had to shut that down during the pandemic. We're going to be starting it up again soon. We limit it to 3 students, so it's very much a hands-on. Teach radio theory, how to solder properly, how to troubleshoot. And like I said, we'll be starting that up again soon. If you're a member of the museum and you have an old vacuum tube radio you want restored, our technicians will restore it for you. We ask people to make a donation commensurate with how much labor goes into it, and of course we charge for the actual cost of parts. So if you come and visit the museum, what kind of stuff will you see? Well, you'll probably see the same kind of stuff you'll see in your own collections. But one of the things in our sort of atrium in the building, we have this really cool Philco neon sign, probably from the late 30s, I'm guessing. We found this in its original box in an antique shop in, actually it was an antique shop in Rockford, Illinois, believe it or not, where we got this. So that's a nice artifact. Of course, we have a DeForest Audion tube, have to have one of those. We have changing exhibits. As of right now, we have one corner that's devoted to crystal radios and an assortment of some factory-built crystal radios and some homemade crystal radios. Of course, we have some classic sets like the Radiola 28. We have some very nice loudspeakers. That's an Airchrome on the left and one called the Enchanter on the right. We have an interesting radio that looks like a grand piano. It's made by Jacobs Brothers, a piano company in New York. And in the front part, you got an 8-tube radio. And when you open up the back part, the curved part, there's a 78 RPM record player in there. Lots of nice console radios. This is a 1930 Stromberg Carlson with some beautiful, nice wood in it. This is one of my favorites. It's a PlayPal radio. It came out just after Congress had repealed Prohibition. So to celebrate the end of Prohibition, you open up the little doors on the side and there's whiskey bottles and shot glasses there. We have a Philco grandfather clock radio. We have a 1939 Philco mystery control, and this has been restored to good operating conditions. So when visitors come by, they can pick up the little telephone dial and change stations on it. And, people really enjoy that. This is a pretty rare item. It's a 1939 Crosley Rideau. This is one of the very, very few items in the museum that we actually purchased. We bought it at an antique auction some years ago. Came out in 1939. It's like a fax machine that delivers a newspaper to your home by radio broadcast. We have a couple of early television sets. This is a 1931 kit made by a company called Seal, scanning disc television kit. But we also have a 1931 factory-built scanning disc television set. This is a Davin from 1931. And what's interesting about this is at the time, there was a disagreement about standards for scanning disc TV. So you had like some cities were broadcasting a 24-line picture, some a 36-line picture, some a 38-line picture. And if you open up the back door here, there's a huge scanning disc with 3 spirals of holes corresponding to those different number of lines in the picture. And so if you move from town to town, there's that sort of little board sticking up out of the top, and you could raise or lower that so that the little frame would come on the right set of the spiral of the dots on there, so that you could actually adjust it for the different frame rates that were used back in those days. We have an early electronic set. This is a TK RCA TRK 120 with a mirror in the lid. And this is, again, one of the very, very few sets that we've had to purchase. About 99.9% of everything you see has been donated to the museum. We have a couple of early color sets. That's an RCA CT100 on the left and a Motorola color set from '54 on the right. We have a volunteer right now who has got the chassis for the CT100 home. Thank God the picture tube is still good, and he's working on it. We're trying to get that fixed so that we can demonstrate that TV to visitors. We have a lot of transistor radios. I would say we probably have a couple of hundred transistor radios, including a Regency TR1. We have some radio premiums on display, stuff from Little Orphan Annie and Captain Midnight, and here's a Captain Midnight book that's on display with the radio premiums. We have our restoration shop. This is one of the workbenches at the restoration shop, and of course, test equipment and lots of parts on hand. We have this, except it's not on display right now. This is a wonderful piece of RCA equipment. Baltimore station WFBR had this installed back in 1939. And when they moved to a new building, they left this old console in their old building, and it sat there for decades. And then, several years ago, they were going to tear down that building, and we were given a chance to come and pick up this equipment. So we disassembled it. We have it in storage right now. And the problem is the thing is so damn big, it won't fit in any of our rooms in the museum and allow anybody to get around, in the same room with us. So as I say, we have it in storage. We hope that one of these days we'll get a bigger building with a big enough room that we can put this back together again and show it to people. We have a ham station on site. K3RTV is our ham station. And this is our Jim, one of our ham volunteers. And we have a nice modern digital transceiver here over on the left, but then we also have a Johnson Ranger and some old Hammerlands. So our ham members who want to come and operate, they can either use the modern transceiver or they can use the 1950s vintage equipment if they prefer the boat anchor stuff. We do have special exhibits from time to time. We're like the Smithsonian. We only have about 10% of our collection on exhibit at any one given time. And so, every once in a while, we'd take stuff out of a room and put in a new exhibit. And this is one we had back in 2018, which was the 100th anniversary of World War I. So, example, here on the left, we had a Navy direction finding receiver from World War I. This thing in the wood case here is an air-to-ground radio telephone, actually from the Royal Air Force in England, but it was made by GE. Here we have a crystal set used by the Army. Have an old loose copper crystal set that would have been used back in the era. This is one of these code training sets here, and we have some Morse code training records up here. So an example of some of the stuff that we had on display for that. This is an exhibit we have in place right now showing what it would look like if you went into a radio station back in the 1950s. So we have a turntable here. We have an Ampex, early Ampex tape unit here, an RCA mixer, some nice microphones, Associated Press teletype machine. This is a wire recorder, a portable wire recorder from station WMAL in DC. So it's an example of the kind of changing exhibits that we do. So if any of you are interested, you're welcome to become a member. The website is ncrtv.org, National Capital Radio TV Museum, ncrtv.org. So for $25 a year, you get a subscription to our quarterly journal with articles about radio and TV history. You get invited to our special events. If you purchase anything in our museum shop, you get a discount. And of course, you help to preserve radio and TV history. So if any of you are interested, I would urge you to think about becoming a member. So that's the end of my presentation, and I'll take some time here to offer questions and answers if any of you have any questions and answers.
Well, Brian, on membership to the museum, am I right in saying that you can pay online by PayPal?
I believe that's correct. That's not part of my responsibility there, but I believe if you want to pay, the best thing to do is to send an email to info@ncrtv.org, and they will respond with and say you want to become a member. They will respond with a PayPal invoice, and you can join that way. But the other thing I'll mention is that the museum was started by all of us from the Mid-Atlantic Antique Radio Club, and so we have a reciprocity agreement. The normal first-year membership is $25, but if you are a MARC member, you can join for your first year for only $20. Or if you're a member of the museum, you can join the Mid-Atlantic Antique Radio Club for only $20. So we have that special deal reciprocity between the radio club and the museum. Thank you, Robert.
Well, Brian, that was a most excellent presentation of a most excellent museum. That's another one of the places that's now on my bucket list. I think it's just fantastic what you've described there, and I really do want to get out there, and I do appreciate the fact that you can use more members, and I think it's really good that a lot of the people here today are members of multiple clubs, and I think that keeps the hobby going, and it provides a lot of cross-pollination, and I think that in the long run will keep this hobby going. And so thanks for creating that museum, and thanks for sharing it with us today.
Well, thank you, Tom. Let me make another comment too. We're open Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, but if any of you from ARCI are going to be in the DC area and you want to come like on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, if you give me an email, and now I'm a member, so my email is in your database. If you give me an email, I would be willing to make a special opening for any ARCI members any day of the week. So keep that in mind.
That's fantastic. I do get out to the East Coast once in a while, and with some relatives back there, so I will definitely give you a call if you're not open. So thanks for that offer. Next up, we have Bill Ballad, who's presented before at these meetings. And today he's going to talk about a very unique design of speakers and headphones called the moving armature concept. And before he described that to me, I didn't have any concept that there was this sort of a design. So Bill, take it away.
Now, I guess I want to talk about balanced armature devices. It all started in 1910 with a device invented by a fellow named Nathaniel Baldwin, who lived in Salt Lake City. He was an engineer working for the power company there, and decided he needed well, he was a Mormon, and he couldn't hear the presentations when they had them at the Mormon temple. He couldn't hear the speaker. And in 1910, there was no such thing as public address systems. They didn't have any way of increasing the sound. So he decided he was going to build basically a public address system. So what he did was to start working on a pneumatic system. He needed to have a driver for it. His idea was to use a telephone receiver as the driver, but the telephone receivers that were in use at that time were just not very sensitive. So he decided he would make a more sensitive telephone receiver, and that's where we got to start at. This is a Model C, his Type C, made by Nathaniel Baldwin, Salt Lake City, with patent dates of 1910 and 1915. And it was basically just a telephone receiver. This is a little bit later version of the same thing. You can see it's changed now to the Baldwin Radio Company. And what happened was between 1910, well, in 1910, Baldwin sold 100 of his devices to the Navy for listening to radio. The early radio sets that the Navy was using From that, Baldwin developed a factory that he could build basically earphones at. Moving on, this is the interior of the earphone, the motor itself. The ring around the outside, if you look around the outside, there's a ring. That's a magnet. It's a permanent magnet of some power. In the center of that, there's a coil of wire which wraps around an iron leaf or armature. That armature is able to rock back and forth. It's called a balanced armature, and it can move back and forth very slightly between the pole pieces of the magnet. At the same time, it's driven by the coil. There's a small drive rod attached to that, which you can barely see there, it coming out just behind the wires. Now, this is the headphone set itself. And then what we have here is the front of this device. The neat thing about it is the diaphragm itself. That's this. You can barely see the diaphragm. It's very difficult to see because it's clear. It's made out of mica. When I was a kid, my dad had a pair of Baldwin earphones, and I was fascinated by this clear piece of mica that you could look right through and see the back of the receiver with. So that's the Baldwin receiver. The idea was a good one. The balanced armature device is very effective. Let me try cutting this out now. I want to go to a different one. This is a description of how it works, if I can get this to work. Now, this is the reason I'm using this is it's a modern version of the balanced armature, but this is a good demonstration of the parts that are in it. If you look at the top, you can see that there is a coil of wire which surrounds the, in this case, the armature. And then in the front part, there are a pair of magnets. You can see that in the section view. Two magnets, one on each side, and the coil of wire, which actually just wraps around the armature. The armature then connects to a drive rod, which then connects to a diaphragm or a paddle. This is the modern version, and I'll get back to that somewhat later. Moving on, the balanced armature became quite popular in the as an earphone. Baldwin's earphone was, let's move on to the next, there we go. Baldwin's earphone was popular through the early 1920s when radios basically used earphones, but very quickly the radio business needed more than just an earphone. Now, most of us realize that some of the early loudspeakers were horns, driven by some sort of a diaphragm arrangement. The Baldwin earphone actually worked very well as a driver for a horn, and was adapted for that. And Baldwin sold a number of horn drivers. But very quickly, the radio manufacturers decided that they needed something better, and that was a cone loudspeaker. So they adapted the cone. They adapted the Baldwin motor, the balanced armature motor, to drive a cone. This is one version there of the Atwater Kent, quite a popular device. Oops, I don't want that one yet. This is the Stromberg-Carlson. Stromberg-Carlson built a similar device. The diaphragm is missing on this one. It's a big cone which sits out over the front of it, but you can see the motor located in the middle. This is the motor itself. You can see the magnet is a horseshoe magnet in this case, quite a popular type magnet, and the coil and armature are located right in the center of it, with the drive rod sticking out the front, hopefully hooking up to a cone if it's working properly. Moving on. This is another version. I gotta get the other pictures. This is actually the RCA version. These are quite common, and that you see them all the time at radio meets and stuff like that. There are two versions. They both use the same model number. It's model 100, the first one is the large cylindrical case, which is basically a large cone driven by a balanced armature. The smaller one is, again, a similar construction, but uses actually, we'll look at that in a second. The newer version of the 100 actually uses a separate speaker in the center of it. You can see the motor with the horseshoe magnet, the drive rod going through to the cone, and that is the RCA 100. The older RCA 100 has a very similar motor, but the speaker is not in a basket the way the more modern version is. So this is the RCA 100, and you'll run across these quite often. Now moving on. By the end of the 1920s, the balanced armature device was superseded by a much better type of speaker, which was the dynamic loudspeaker, the moving coil loudspeaker that we're familiar with today, which is used in almost all applications. In the early 1930s, the speakers became quite popular and were used in most of the modern sets. The exception to this was the use of the balanced armature in farm radios. These are radios which are designed to be powered off of batteries and were developed in the mid-30s and into the late 30s. This is a Zenith speaker. It's a balanced armature loudspeaker from a farm radio. You can see in the center of the speaker, you can see the drive rod coming up to match the cone. Most of the farm radios that used a balanced armature for two reasons. One of them was the magnet itself. The permanent magnet used in the balanced armature didn't have to be all that strong. It had to be a decent magnet, but not very powerful. The moving coil loudspeakers needed a much greater magnetic field to drive the coil. So they needed to draw some power to power the speaker. And if you'll recall, most of the speakers that were used in the 1930s are electrodynamics, which means they have a field coil, which was driven by the radio power supply. It was actually generally used as part of the filtering circuit in the power supply. The field coil giving a much stronger magnetic field than a permanent magnet. The permanent magnets were available in the 1930s. At the very end of the 30s and just after the Second World War, magnetic materials became available that were quite powerful. Alnico being the main magnetic material that was developed. It was basically developed during the war for radar applications, but Alnico became the popular magnetic material. Now, after the Second World War, the balanced armature had some decline. It was used for some devices, but not very many. Now I'm going to go off of share with the pictures and back to me live. After the war, the balanced armature had sort of a decline and nearly disappeared, but it was revived basically by a company called Knowles Electronics. Hugh Knowles saw a need for a small transducer to go into hearing aids. So he developed a balanced armature receiver, receiver being an earphone, for use in hearing aids. Now, what I have here are some results of that type of device. This is an insert earphone. Actually, it's an Etymotic ER6. Now, Etymotic research was started by Meade Killian, who developed high fidelity hearing aids. That was his dissertation in about 1976. He was able to take a balanced armature receiver and then by properly adjusting the acoustic output of it, make a very good quality sound system. And this is the earphone that this is similar to the earphone that he developed then. Today you can buy a number of these small insert earphones which allow very good quality sound reproduction. Indeed, some of them are some of the best sound reproducers you can get. So it's basically the end of the balanced armature. It's used today. Several million of these are sold every year for use either as high fidelity headsets or as hearing aid receivers, hearing aid earphones. So the balanced armature survives today after over 100 years. So it's interesting. It's an interesting device, and hope you run across them sometime. I think I'm pretty well set with that then. We can go back to you, Tom.
Well, thank you, Bill. That was a fascinating presentation about the moving armatures there. I didn't realize they went back that far to 1910, and you explained the differences between the two types quite clearly. I think that's a fascinating topic, and hope we all learned a little bit about those transducers.
Hey, Bill, I have a question. Can both types be tested with the typical 9-volt battery?
Mute.
I could volunteer. Yes.
Yes, generally yes. Sometimes there are transformers in them that might be a problem. I don't know, but yeah, they can be.
Okay, thanks.
Bill, I have a question. The moving armature, are those all cone speakers, high impedance cone speakers, or were there other types of high impedance cone speakers?
Matt, I could offer some comment.
Right, and I'm sorry, Bill, but I think if you turn off your camera, we'll hear you better.
Most high impedance speakers are balanced armature.
Well, also they were used as horn drivers. I've got a couple of pictures that I could share with you on that subject.
Yeah, please do.
But a classic 20s horn driver, for a TRF, that would be a balanced armature design.
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
Here's a Baldwin, the last of their Baldwin speakers, and here they've using the balanced armature horn driver in a plaster horn, and it's in an aluminum case, and actually works pretty good. You need to look up Nathaniel Baldwin on I guess Wikipedia. He mentioned that he had a Mormon association. Very interesting. He actually wound up doing some prison time about 1930 as a result. So it's a short read, but it's very interesting. I also have another picture that I could share of a British version of about, let me see, share screen. This is a Celestian made in England, and it's quite unusual in that the cone is made out of parchment, and that spiral is actually 1 millimeter square bamboo. that's glued to one side of the cone to make it ultra rigid. Let me toggle through a few irrelevant. On the back side of the cone, it has these 1 millimeter square radial reinforcements. So it's an incredibly rigid arrangement for the balanced armature driver, where it's only moving a few thousandths of an inch. And but this is actually a very good speaker. These are lousy pictures, but you can definitely see that it has 2 coil sets on either side of a fulcrum. I mean, a pivot. And that transformer in there is a kludge that somebody put in there. I was able to get rid of all that and make it back to the original. But very, very interesting non-American way to do things. And but it works very good. And this is circa 1930. So, okay, that's my QRM for the day here. So I'll stop share.
Thank you, Robert.
I have a question about the Baldwin earphones. I've seen a variety of them, and I've seen information that the diaphragms were made out of lots of different kind of materials. I guess I could look it up, but could you tell me how many different types of Baldwin earphones there are?
I'm not sure I know. I know you're right. There are different diaphragm materials. I think there were the one that I show is a type C. That's the ones I have. But there were other types, and I think there was the type F, which would suggest that there were like 5 different versions, but I don't have any of them. Haven't seen any of them recently.
I could say in my experience.
Has anyone else seen Baldwin's?
Yeah, I could say in my experience, I've only seen mica diaphragms for Baldwin.
Well, okay. That was a great presentation and some great additional information from Bill and Robert. And good question, Dale.
I know I've seen a phenolic diaphragm, but I don't have one.
Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you, Bill, for that excellent presentation. And that was fascinating stuff. And I hope we all learned something from that. The next section of our video meeting is the show and tell, tips and techniques. But before we do that, let's answer this poll about being a presenter. I know there's lots of people out there who have lots of interesting stuff to talk about and share with us. So please consider being a presenter. It makes these meetings what they are. I saw from the poll earlier that we have 3 show and tells at least, and I've got one as well, so that's 4. So we can proceed into that section. And we since we only had 2 presentations today, we've got a lot of extra time. So if you're doing a show and tell, I'm not going to limit you to 3 minutes. You can stretch it out a little bit. So who's got the first show and tell?
I can start.
Okay, Mike.
Yeah, hope you can all see this. Last Sunday, I drove up north of the border to Milwaukee and New Berlin, actually, and went to the Warkey swap meet, and the rain held off, and it was enjoyable. Got to see a lot of good folks up there. Saw Dale and some other guys. Few interesting items. I didn't get much. I got some parts there, but I did get this this one radio. Nobody else really wanted it, but it's a Silvertone from 1961. Can you hear me, by the way? Got to talk over the radio here. And it says it's got 2 speakers in it, which it does, which is kind of interesting. It's kind of an all-American 5, but it's different. And what caught my attention right away is that it's got 5 tubes. They're not the usual suspects. The 3 low signal tubes are actually 18-volt tubes. There's a 32-volt heater audio output, and the rectifier is a 36 AM3. So I said, well, this is interesting. What's different about that? And I looked it up. The heater string is actually 100 milliamps rather than the usual 150 that we're used to with the 12-volt tubes. If you work it out, the power for the heaters on the small signal tubes are still about the same wattage as the 12-volt tubes. But I think the rectifier is about, it's what, 36 AM3, so it's similar. Both of those are a little bit lower though in power than like a 35 W4 or 50 C5. But so I thought, okay, well, let's try it. We'll see what that does. But the inside of the radio, it does have 2 speakers. It's got a printed circuit board, which I guess for that period of time is how they started doing it. It came with an interlock, which didn't make a lot of sense since the interlock doesn't protrude through the back, so you have to take the cover off to take the line cord off the interlock. But another, and the only thing I had to do to this at the moment, I haven't redone the AC wiring, but I did change the electrolytics. Another thing about this radio, it does not have any paper caps or film caps. They use ceramic, and they used a little couplet for the the circuitry between the audio preamp and the power amp. So I decided, okay, well, I'll start looking for the schematic for it, and I was able to get close to the year. I couldn't find it under Sears. I looked, I thought, oh, it's probably a Warwick set, right? Turns out, no. I kind of by accident, I stumbled across an Arvin set with 18-volt tubes, and I started looking into it. It actually, it's an Arvin set, and I was able to tell it's the exact same printed circuit board from this, what they show here in the picture.
Can you share that with us, Mike? Can you share your screen?
You seeing it now? There was actually a drawing on the schematic that showed the back of the printed circuit board, and it's the same board. So I said, okay, well, Arvin made this, and that was news to me. Maybe you guys know about that, but it wasn't made in Chicago apparently, or at least not by Warwick. But it did require a little bit of work. The socket for the converter tube was very noisy. I had to take that out and clean it and retension the pins. I replaced some resistors and the lytics, and it works. The only other problem I had with it at the time was the way the speakers are held in there is kind of very. I guess they were trying to be very cost effective. They just have bosses off the plastic front, and push pins, or push nuts rather, on the bosses. Well, some of the bosses were either snapped off or truncated, and the speakers were kind of half falling out. So I had to actually look for a couple of push nuts. I didn't have any in my collection that I was aware of, and so I thought, well, am I going to get that at Home Depot or Menards? And I thought, they probably don't even know what that is. But I did go to an auto parts store, and I've had luck at those places before when I've, looking for obscure or exotic hardware. And they actually did have a push nut, and I was able to make it fit, at least for the time being. I'm not sure it's a long-term fix or not, but then I don't know if this is a long-term radio. So,
Well, that's very cool, Mike.
Yeah, that's about it. So.
Yeah, well, that just shows you how going to a swap meet can change your whole activity profile for the next few years.
Sure did, and I had fun.
And you learned a lot, and I learned a lot too from that. So thanks for sharing that with us, Mike.
You're welcome.
Any questions for Mike on that?
Well, I might remark that Lud Sibley, the expert on RCA tube development, says that the 100 milliampere string tubes was RCA's last gasp at trying to make a cost-effective tube for broadcast receivers. So that's why you should have one in your collection, is because it's the last of the breed.
All right. Very interesting. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that with us, Robert. That's a real interesting piece of information. All right. Thanks, Mike. Who's got the next show and tell?
Well, I'll be glad to go.
Okay.
Good morning again. My name is Derick Bonewitz. I'm in Libertyville. This is my first time here with this group, so very nice to sit in with you. I was directed this way by Tom Kleinschmidt, one of your group, who I guess is not with you today. I had an Atwater Kent 55C kind of fall into my lap a couple of months ago. And I've not restored radios before. I'm an amateur radio operator and electronic hobbyist, but I just couldn't bear to see that radio put out to the curb for disposal. So I took it on, and it didn't take long for me to be put in touch with Tom, and he had some helpful suggestions on how to get schematics and so forth. So I'll tell you a little bit about it. I'm going to be doing more telling than showing because I'm running here from an iPad, and I don't see a way to share a screen with my photos, but I'll show you a live picture here in a minute. This is an Atwater Kent 55C. It's a later version. The serial number indicates that it's the later version. It's got 3 sardine can capacitors under the chassis, which I think is also an indicator of that later version. It had a Type F4 speaker. It was in a console cabinet by Red Lion, which was a Pennsylvania manufacturer, as was Atwater Kent. It was a filthy radio. It was just in very, very dirty shape. The power cord was damaged. The speaker cone was torn. Some tubes were rolling around loose in the cabinet, but there wasn't any physical damage. And I didn't see any evidence of repairs or modifications or, explosions or anything like that. In addition to Tom's helping me started with this, there was a very fine series of YouTube videos by a guy named Greg Gillum. Maybe some of you have run across that. His YouTube channel is called Greg's Vintage Workshop, and he put together a 15-part series on his effort to restore just this model of radio. So it was quite lengthy just to watch all of those, but very informative. All the transformer windings were okay, including on the speaker, tested okay. I cleaned out the filter cap assemblies and the sardine cans and replaced those with modern components. Probably all the usual things you guys are familiar with.
Can you show us the radio?
Say again?
Can you show it to us?
Yeah, I will show it to you here. Let me see if I can get the picture going here.
Cool.
Let me flip around to the other camera here. Here we go. There it is. Can you see it all right?
Yeah, that looks great.
Okay, so
that would be a good thing to just show it as you talk. Sure.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I've got it on now, so let me turn it up, see if you hear anything.
Doubled in the last 2 weeks, with the rate of cases highest in states where less than half of the people are fully vaccinated. In Los Angeles.
So I think that's WBBM. I've got the front panel on it, as you can see, which unfortunately hides a lot of really very nice looking hardware, including those nice brass parts. I've got the top cover off, so you can kind of take a look down in there. It cleaned up pretty well, I think. It's been repainted.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah.
And the original speaker, as I said, it had a torn cone. And I was able to repair it with some glue and coffee filters. But I too was at the Wisconsin Hamfest the other day in up near Milwaukee, and happened to find one of these. So this is the same speaker. It's the Model F4, but in a nice enclosure. So very happy to have found that. So I'm sure you guys know a lot more about these radios than I do. So I'll be very happy to have any suggestions that you might have about what to check or what to do or whatever.
That's great.
It does have a very mild hum in it when the volume is all the way down, but it's very, very low, and maybe there's a certain baseline level that's kind of to be expected anyway. So not quite sure about that, but it was kind of a fun project to work on. So happy to show it to you.
Well, Derick, that's great. I'm glad you could share that with us. You've done a great job in getting it working and making it look real nice. So thanks to you and Tom's help with you there. That's an awesome thing.
Thank you.
Any questions for Derick?
I might just mention that my next project, because once I told a friend I was doing this, he immediately offered to give me something else out of his attic. So I've got a Grundig Majestic from I guess the mid 50s. So if anybody's familiar with those or done any work on those, I'll be delighted to talk to you about that one, because that's the next one that's teed up here.
Well, I would suggest that you put that info in the chat window right here, and your contact information, and then that way people can contact you about that Grundig. So.
Will do, Tom. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Derick. Okay, who's got the next show and tell?
I'll go with mine.
Okay, Dale.
This is Dale Boyce from Milwaukee. I didn't meet Derick at the meet last Sunday, the Milwaukee meet, but I did see Tom Van Beek and who was this on? Well, anyway, the day before there was a ham fest at Oak Creek, Wisconsin. And I don't have many microphones, but I found this ring type microphone, actually a hexagonal cast ring with a nice little microphone inside. From the 20s, and needs a paint job, and it's missing a spring, but it caught my eye. And
what is the brand?
The brand, it says, is a new Universal Model X with a protected diaphragm. So serial number 157. And I did find some stuff on the internet when I looked that up, and the new Universal Model X apparently was around for a while, and the variations of it. So it's in the to be worked on category. So
I think they were mostly used circa 1928-30 in PA systems for schools, as opposed to being not a broadcast quality microphone.
Okay. Yeah, it'll look nice on the shelf. So it's we got a lot of other hexagonal shaped radio devices, like the Atwater, not the Atwater, the Allen Bradley. All of their stuff was designed around the octagonal image. So anyway, it was good to see ARCI members and WARCI members at both of the meets. And a shout out to Barry Janov. I see he's on the line here. I saw him at the Oak Creek Ham Fest. So it's good to be back in the radio meets.
Agreed. Well, thank you, Dale, for that very unique microphone, sharing that with us. And again, another example of get out to those swap meets. This is where you find new stuff and make your collection more interesting. Okay. Any other show and tells today? And you know, we've also retitled this section "Show and Tell, Tips and Techniques." So if you've got just some little technique that you'd like to share with us, this is the time to do it. So, any other show and tells? I have one, so I'll share my screen, and typically we try to do 3 to 5 minutes on this, but I might take longer because we have a little extra time today. And also I'm the moderator, so I get to do what I want. All right, so a number of years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I was at an antique store down here in Wilmington, Illinois, and the owner had a bunch of radios, and I explained that, yeah, I like to restore radios, but what he had on display didn't really interest me. And he said, well, I got a shop in the basement, and he took me downstairs, and he had a bunch of radios that were basket cases, and this is what I found. And he was glad to sell it to me for $20 or something, very cheap. And I was real interested in it because a lot of reasons. I like wood radios, and it was a Crosley, and I'd never seen a wooden Crosley from that era, you know, the late 40s, early 50s. And it looked restorable in my eyes. And so I bought it, and last fall I restored the cabinet, and this spring I've been getting the chassis going, and it's in process. It's not done yet, but I thought I'd share it as a show and tell. And since we got a little extra time, I dumped a bunch of slides with all my photos here. So this is an All-American 5 with octal tubes, and hence the O in the part number. They also had a Loctal version, same kind of a chassis. So as you can see, it was in bad shape. The speaker cone was pretty messed up. Grill cloth was shredded. Cabinet was falling apart. You can see there's cracks here and cracks there. And these uprights, there's kind of a unique design feature you haven't really seen in a radio like this. And they're made out of plastic. And they were a little bit warped, but not too bad. And then there you can see the tube layout, and you can see that the Crosley division of Avco, and it was made in Cincinnati. And so this little label was in good shape. And the back was in pretty darn good shape too, which was good. A lot of times you find a radio and the back is gone or beat up, but this one was in very good shape. So this had potential. Here's two pictures side by side. You can see how the plastic upright columns were kind of screwed in. That had kind of broken out, and the top and bottom were coming apart. So I just pulled it apart and cleaned up all the joints. And this is kind of an awkward picture, but I had to repair the top first, and that's why I used wax paper and some stiffening boards and glue, and I kind of got the top back square and unlaminated back together. And then I took the top and the bottom, put it back together, and at this point I had removed all the veneer on top because there wasn't much to start with. And then I got it all glued back together, and then I laid a little bit of clear lacquer on there just to see what the wood might look like with some clear on it without any stain, and it looked pretty nice. And I had some veneer that looked like it was about the right shade and grain and all that. So I cut up a piece of veneer and I glued it on the top using some wood glue and some clamps and a dumbbell. These are really useful. You can find them a lot of times at garage sales. These dumbbells are really great for situations like this where you need a lot of weight and pressure and you can't really get a clamp that'll reach in there. And you can, my weightlifting days are pretty much over. So this is what they're used for now. And there's what it looked like after I got the top re-veneered and before I put any stain on it. And then you can see the grain is kind of looking white because the powder from the sanding is in there. But once I got it coated with some clear lacquer, I had to kind of match the top to the rest of it. And so I used some of this toning lacquer. And this is after I've also put on the black trim paint and then a bunch of clear lacquer, but I didn't use any stain on this. So then back to the chassis. This thing was in pretty bad shape speaker wise, but what was pretty amazing was that it didn't take much to get it working. The speaker paper was pretty shot. You can see in this picture here, this is where I've already ripped out the line cord, but there was a resistor here that burned open. And so I kind of looked at things and it wasn't really difficult to get it working. I just recapped it and changed the resistors that needed to. And there it is sitting in my radio cradle after I recapped it, and it worked. And what was pretty amazing is here's a little video I took of the speaker after some of the paper blew out. And it was quite serviceable. I could have closed it up and no one would have known, but that's not my style. So I decided I was going to take the speaker out, and it was a nice looking speaker, and I wasn't going to try to retrofit some speaker in there. So I decided I'm going to try reconing a speaker, which I've never done before. But this is a nice little frame. It's got Crosley stamped into the frame. It looked pretty nice. So I went and I cut out the ring that goes here, and I cleaned this all up, and I cut everything away except the voice coil, which was still very securely attached to this spider here. So I cut all this paper away and unsoldered the wires from the terminals there. And then I just took another 4-inch speaker, and I just took an X-Acto and I cut a really nice cone out of it, unsoldered its wires, and I just, using the old voice coil, I just re-glued this donor cone on here and glued it in and resoldered it. And I glued the dust cap back on. That's some white glue that dried clear. And then when I was done, I took some black paint to cover the solder. And I tell you, it works great. It sounds fantastic. So this was my first attempt at doing this. And I tell you, YouTube is the resource I went to. I just found all kinds of people that are very helpful that have done this sort of thing. And so it was a first for me. So there's what it looks like now without any grill cloth. And this is where I'm going to finish up my presentation because I don't have any grill cloth yet. And so I'm presently shopping for that. But there's a little bit of some damage on the glass under there on the paint. So that's my presentation. And so when I get the grill cloth, I'll put it on these special little corner things, but it's very stylish design. The grill cloth wraps all the way around and is supported on these wooden pieces here. And that's my presentation. So any questions for me on that?
Well, we know one thing that's going to go in the items wanted section, grill cloth for this particular radio.
Yeah. Well, I've been searching around, and when I've ordered some, it hasn't come in the mail yet. But I'll share my sources once I get them and see if you guys know about that. But it's not the easiest stuff to find anymore. But so that's it.
There are some coarse weave grill cloths that are marketed for restoring these German radios of the 50s and 60s. That's pretty reminiscent of that style of grill cloth. So I think there's some. Did you look on eBay? I guess that's a stupid question.
I did, and I found a couple of sources there, and I'll let you know how it turns out. You know, what I'm worried about is it comes in and it's a piece of shag carpet or something. You know, it's real thick and fuzzy. And but there is a place I ordered from that Tom Kleinschmidt recommended called Richmond Designs down in Louisiana, and that guy also restored radios, and so he's on eBay. He's got his own website, so he looked like a good resource. But the jury's out. I don't have the samples and the pieces in yet, so I'll let you know how that turns out. All right. If we don't have any other show and tells for today, what we do at this point is we talk a little bit about the swap meet. And Tom's not here today. Tom Kleinschmidt, our president, is not here today to talk about that. And all I can say is our next swap meet is Saturday, August 7th. Note that it's on a Saturday. We normally do our swap meets on Sundays, but it's now on Saturday, August 7th. So make a note of that. And I know Tom has been sending out updates on that. What I'm going to do at this point is say goodbye for the sake of the YouTube video, and join us again. And we'll go into the open unmoderated session, and we'll just hang on the line. We've got until noon to talk. So thank you, everyone.